2020 Sydney Innovation Festival. This festival is designed to introduce students to innovation opportunities and the entrepreneurial mindsets of thought leaders from both inside and outside the University of Sydney. My name is Nick Stevens, and I will be the MC for the event. The festival is composed of 4 sections, including, number 1, our keynote panel that discusses innovation in the Australian context and its potential ties to social impact. Number 2, the Crisis or Opportunity panel that shares how diverse businesses are using the pandemic to their advantage. Number 3, the Working in Innovation post-COVID sessions, which discusses the startup culture and skills needed to work in innovation. And finally, our last session, the University Opportunity section, maps out how students can learn the entrepreneurial mindset to become innovators themselves in any discipline. These are accessible in your email invitation, and you can join each panel by clicking on the Zoom link webinar. You can also participate in today's session by using Slido to ask any questions and upvote questions. Simply jump onto slido.com and sign in using the hashtag USID code. We will also have surveys and polls released during the session, so you can let the speakers know what you would like to hear more about next time. I'd like to now hand over to Richard Miles, who is the Pro Vice Chancellor for Education, Enterprise and Engagement at the University of Sydney.
Thank you very much, Nick. And before we begin our meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. I'm currently on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I further acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which you are on and pay respects to their elders, past, present and future. Now, innovation is going to be, and both research and education is going to be central to this university's and of course Australia's future success. For Sydney University to thrive in this field, it is essential that we promote diversity, interdisciplinary learning and collaboration, which this festival does a fantastic job in doing. Today, you'll hear from Australia's best thought leaders and innovators, and I sincerely thank all of our speakers for volunteering their time to inspire our students and the broader public. Now, I'm going to hand over the session to our keynote panel host, Adam Spencer, who I'm sure you all know is a really brilliant mathematical communicator. He is the University of Sydney's first ambassador for mathematics and science and dedicates his time to numerous charitable causes as he knows a thing or two about social impact. Thank you very much for hosting the festival. So over to Adam now.
Oh, thank you very, very much, Nicholas. Thank you so much for all the effort you've put in today. And Richard, thank you for that wonderful introduction and your very loose definition of the word brilliant. I'll take that any day of the week. I'm really glad to be here, and I want to thank you all so much for having me as part of the Sydney Innovation Festival, this keynote session entitled Innovation and Social Impact. What exactly is innovation? How does Australia compete on a global scale? How can it be used to better this country and the world? Well, we're not mucking around to discuss these things. We have a superstar panel of innovation thought leaders, including the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull, the 29th Prime Minister of Australia, University of Sydney Professor Hala Zreiqat, and ABC journalist and host of the not-to-be-missed The Business, Elise Morgan. Thank you all so much for joining me, panel. Everyone out there, give them a big virtual wave. And I'll start with you, Malcolm, if it's all right. You were known by many as the Innovation Prime Minister. You championed the 2015 Ideas Boom, Snowy Hydro 2.0, a host of initiatives under your leadership. Today, you're an investor and passionate commentator on the topic of innovation and harnessing it. Malcolm, how do you define innovation in the Australian context today, and why should students be so interested?
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Well, look, innovation is being prepared to do something differently, to approach problems from a new perspective. It's the combination of restlessness, ingenuity, and curiosity. It's the being resistant to the not invented here, or we've always done it this way, and being constantly, restlessly looking for better ways to do things, for ways to disrupt the established order, to be in whatever manner you like, but in a very benign and constructive way, generally, something of a revolutionary.
Elise, Malcolm's talked about a restlessness, a disruptive nature, a questioning of how things are done. You consistently report on Australian business, Elise, through your work at the ABC. Do you agree with Malcolm's definition of innovation and where it sits in the Australian context?
Well, I'd be a pretty brave person to disagree with Malcolm. No, just kidding. I agree that it is born out of that restlessness, out of a requirement to do something new, etc. I mean, in Malcolm's maiden speech to Parliament, which I read over the weekend, he said, "We believe Australia's economy and prosperity depend on a culture of initiative and enterprise, which supports Australians doing what we do best, which is having a go." And that's become a horrible cliche in the past 12 months. But it's true. That's really what we must do. Without innovation and without coming up with anything new, Australia is really just an economy about houses and big holes in the ground. And so in order to ensure prosperity right across all parts of the country, including regional Australia, and that we all move forward together, that we have jobs across the country, new, exciting, interesting and well-paid jobs, we have to continue to evolve and come up with new things, particularly in relation to how innovation relates to business. I think it's very interesting that I think the word innovation is a little bit abused in that some businesses use it to just basically put a moniker around cost cutting, but then and then other businesses can use it to encapsulate billion-dollar programs where they're partnering with universities, they're partnering with academics, they're partnering with government organisations to come up with something genuinely new, genuinely exciting, and genuinely answering questions that business and parts of society have.
I like very much that you've done your homework and read the former Prime Minister's maiden speech. Professor Zreiquat, you were a Eureka Prize winner, Australia's most prestigious science awards, for the innovative use of technology last year. You lead multiple teams in research efforts. How did you become an innovator yourself, and what type of factors influenced that decision, Professor?
Thank you, Adam. And if I might just go back to how I started. Ever since I graduated from my bachelor studies, I always wanted to do medical research, was interested in it. I did my undergraduate in Jordan. We've never heard of medical research at the time until I migrated to Australia in the early 90s. Fast forward decades later, I'm now heavily involved in medical research, and that's in the area of tissue engineering and orthopedics. I'm sure many of you know or have a relative who had a total knee replacement or a total hip replacements. Now, these materials that are currently used are made of metal, titanium. Why titanium? Two reasons. It is very, very strong. Our bodies always, or our bones are always exposed to high load. And another thing is it withstands the harsh biological environment in our body. The idea of titanium came to us from the aerospace and the ship industry. So while titanium has really saved millions of people over the world, but the fact remains that the average lifespan of an implant in the body is between 15 and 20 years. While this was okay many years ago, when the average lifespan was around 70, it's not anymore the same. We live longer, we lead a much more active life. So many scientists are heavily involved in trying to modify the very surface of these implants to make them more acceptable in the body. That was exactly what I did in my PhD. But then once I finished, I'm going, why can't we develop a material that will integrate with our body, that looks and behaves like bone, that is mechanically strong, and at the end of the day, after it builds the bone, it disappears completely. And that's what we set out to do. Comes ceramic. And for my students, this is ceramic. This is a cup. So now we need to think of it beyond the coffee mug here. And what we did, we took that ceramic, we incorporated into it elements that are important in bone regeneration. I must stress to the fact that I am not a material scientist. And I know that innovation requires the the combination and bringing together different knowledge and disciplines. So I was lucky enough to be recruited to the University of Sydney in 2006, lucky enough to have the generous support from the federal government with grants from the National Health and Medical Research Council, Australian Research Council, to establish a multidisciplinary team with diverse area of expertise, cultures, gender, ethnicity. All of these are important to develop the creativity we need to develop the next generation of material. Another important factor that was critical to me is to develop a material that is not expensive. So we have developed a material that's efficacious, sophisticated, advanced, and effective, but it's most important that it's affordable to everybody in the world to use it. It is cost effective and we can scale it. So I'm happy to report now we have developed the material that can build bone, that can, at the end of the day, we have demonstrated that it will degrade in the body and completely be replaced by a new bone. This is really important for the benefit of the patient, which is exactly the innovation and the idea that I wanted to do, is to come up with material that will help patients and the world in general. And we are happy to have this material now given to a small Australian orthopedic company to market. And so the most important thing is now we have the material. Now I have to speak the other language. I have to really come outside my comfort zone and speak the language of the industry, of entrepreneurs, of the capital ventures, to seek investments to really take it to the market. So this now points to the fact that we as innovators, we need to be widely spread in our expertise and come out of our comfort zone. And what I've learned along the way through trial and error, we are having had that experience myself and understood the value of innovation and having acquired the knowledge about what works and what haven't works. Now with the granting of the Australian Research Centre for Innovative Bioengineering, which we have here at the University of Sydney, I am delighted to see us now paving the way to educate and train the next generation of our young students on the path for entrepreneurship and innovation.
Very much, Professor. A lovely answer. Prime Minister Turnbull, we looked somewhere like the centre where Professor Zreiquat works, a wonderfully funded organisation where innovation will flourish, of course. Recently, a federal budget passed in trying financial times. You saw your fair share of budgets from both sides of the House in your time in Parliament. Are you happy with the resources Australia is currently putting into innovation?
Thank you. Look, the answer is yes and no. I mean, I'm happy that there is more venture capital available now than ever before. I mean, the amount of private sector and institutional money available for innovation, it runs into many billions of dollars today, whereas 20 years ago it basically didn't exist. I am concerned, however, that there is not more government money going into innovation, and particularly at this moment. We do need a bit of Keynesian pump priming government expenditure at the moment. I mean, everyone acknowledges that, and the government's been spending plenty of money to, bump up aggregate demand and offset the hardships of the pandemic. But, research is one area where, a dollar invested will be repaid, many, many times in return. So if ever there was a time to, double up and put more money into research, it is today. So I think generally the budget was a good response to the, catastrophe that we've been facing. But I think it was underdone in terms of research and in terms of education more generally. But, having said that, as I know from past experience, you're living in a world in government of finite resources. And obviously, these are all difficult choices. There are more, so I used to say to my colleagues at budget time, there are many more legitimate claims for the taxpayers' largesse than there are taxpayers' dollars to accommodate them. So that's the challenge. But the good news, the best news, I think, is the amount of money available in the sort of innovation tech ecosystem. And, that was given a very big supercharge by the 2015 National Innovation and Science Agenda. And, I go back to as a venture capitalist, go back many decades, but, back in the 90s, you couldn't raise $1 for tech in Australia. Truthfully, it was impossible. I remember when we couldn't raise any money for Aussie Mail, a real internet company with real customers and real revenues, but I had no difficulty raising money for a gold mine in Siberia, which gave you an indication of Australians' rather skewed attitude to risk and innovation.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Elise, I'm not sure if you've read up on the business case for the gold mine in Siberia, but it's a fascinating one, isn't it, Elise? Because I declare my bias. I'm the ambassador for science at the university, so I'd love to see just money pumped in, but you constantly hear the argument that Malcolm Turnbull's made that money well invested in innovation will pay itself back multiple times over. It's comparatively cheap time now to borrow money with world interest rates as low as they are. Could we be doing more, Elise Morgan?
Oh, of course we could be doing more. Absolutely. I mean, so Innovation Australia, so despite all the research that Australia does, and we do absolutely fantastic research, and there's so many globally important and significant things that Australia has actually brought to the world, some which we could have commercialised better for ourselves and made more money for ourselves. Wi-Fi is one of them. Solar panels is another. The gift of CSL to the world, the blood company that does all sorts of incredible vaccines, etc. That's something that came out of Australia, out of the federal government. In fact, it used to be called the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. That is a huge gift to Australia and to the world that we came up with out of Australian invention and ingenuity. However, despite all that research that we continue to do, technology adoption rates are about 50% lower than any other country. Harvard Centre for International Development ranks Australia at 87th in the world for economic complexity. That's that thing that our country is just houses and holes, and we're not doing enough to actually harness this stuff that's going on inside small companies and startups and research labs and CSIRO, etc. And we have 40% less venture capital compared to the US or Israel. So there is venture capital being that private area of the economy where there's people with a lot of money sitting in funds wanting to spend on startups and things like that, but they want to be guaranteed some kind of success or, at least some level of guarantee that they will get something for this. There's a lot of things that the government could be doing to support this. And I know that governments, and I know, Malcolm, you'd agree with this, really get cheesed off with everyone looking to them saying, oh, we need help. You want to, putting the hands out. But it's not just money. It's also policies that help companies and small businesses and researchers, etc., to go for it. I mean, I was speaking to someone over the weekend who, for the past 18 months, has been working with bioengineers to come up with, this really incredible innovation that, they've been working on. He's got a mortgage. He's got kids. He has to have a day job as well, as do all of the guys that he's working with. How about governments come up with a HEX scheme for professionals so that they can have 18 months out of their workplace? They can be given some kind of salary, 80 grand a year, 50 grand a year. They pay it back when they go back into the workforce, but they have that safety net so that they can sit back, not have to do the daily grind and just work on these innovations. I mean, imagine what we could come up with and imagine the ideas that we're missing out on coming to fruition because we're not supporting those parts of the economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Elise. I'll get your thoughts on that soon, Malcolm Turnbull, but I'll push ahead. We've got some video questions submitted from the University of Sydney's Enactor Society and Swade Society and a couple of winners of the Region Challenge 2020. After this, we'll go to Slido for your comments and questions. So hit us up now on that Slido link you've been sent if there's any questions you'd like to ask of our panel or any points you'd like to make. Well, let's now take our first video question for the panel.
Hi, keynote speakers. We're Enactus. We're a community of 40 social entrepreneurs, and we create social startups.
Our question is this: how do we ensure new technologies mitigate and do not exacerbate ongoing societal inequalities?
Great question, Enactus. Thanks very much. I'll start with you, Malcolm Turnbull. Innovation, if used well, can bridge divides, can even out society and bring people closer together, but it's not always guaranteed. How do we make sure that innovation does enhance and make a fairer society and does not exacerbate ongoing social inequalities?
We have to be very alert to new technologies and alert to their consequences and implications. My old partner in Aussie Mail, Sean Howard, used to say, there's generally a lot of technology available, but always a great shortage of technological imagination. And, you know, the reality is that as new capabilities emerge, it takes us a while to understand what they can be used for. There is a tendency to have a sort of Goldilocks view of new tech and assume that it can only be used for good things, you know, but we shouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, a carpenter can build a baby's crib or a gallows, right? So technology can be used to enable freedom and indeed to suppress it. And we're seeing very good examples of that at the moment. I think a key question, which I don't have a ready answer to, but I think it's perhaps worth to put on the table today, is this conflict between freedom of speech on the one hand and the way in which uncurated speech enabled by social media and, of course, now echoed by an increasingly partisan mainstream media, particularly the Murdoch media, is basically resulting in free speech and the civilised, respectful discourse that requires to be inhibited. You know, a very good friend of mine who lives in the US, formerly European, said, resident of Europe, said he's never felt less free to speak in America than anywhere before in his life, despite the First Amendment. Emily Bazelon's got a very good article about this, an essay about this really, in the New York Times Magazine this week. But this is a fundamental problem. What we've gone from is curated media, where you needed to get past an editor or a producer or director to get your views out there, to the point where now everything is unfiltered. And you see people like Trump, you see news platforms like Fox News, or the really propaganda platforms, and you see how the Murdoch media has moved in this direction. And now people are being besieged with greater voice than ever before, but it is harder and harder to get to the truth. And the question is, can you have a viable democracy in the midst of all of those lies? Now this has been enabled by technology. 10 years ago, we thought this was going to be wonderful. It would liberate the world. People, particularly in the US, particularly in the midst of their election, are really in despair about it. So, these are very wicked problems, and they are resulting in a conflict of principles and values that we've always held dear. We've always assumed that the good argument, the truthful argument, will drive out the bad one. Are we so sure of that today in the age of social media?
A wicked problem indeed, former Prime Minister. Thank you very much for raising it. Let's take our second video question by the Swade Society.
Hi. We're Swade, a society at the University of Sydney focused around user experience and interface design.
Our question is, how will the boom in digital innovation impact the disadvantaged who may not be digitally literate? What can we do to avoid further disparity?
Great question, Swade. Professor Zreiquat, I'll put that to you. Digital literacy, the digital natives versus digital migrants, the haves and the have-nots. How do we make sure we don't become more disparate in that space, Professor?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to see the young people involved in innovation and discoveries. You know, Australia is at the cusp of doing fantastic research. We have a booming commercialization idea. The young people are there. The ideas are there. It is just what we need is to establish the right resource environment that will enable you to grow and start to transform that. You know, I think Malcolm alluded to that innovation can be good and can be bad, can be profitable and can be not. The age, you know, we all know of the Manhattan mission, you know, with the discover, you know, an example of the bad sort of discovery of the neutrons and how it's really can be used in medicine, but also can be used in war. So what we need, we at the university, what we really unique environment that we have here is our ability to do research for the benefit of to bring reality, to bring to reality the opportunities and the benefit they represent. So in general, innovation in this process of finding solutions to the problem, in my case, as I alluded to, it's to improve lives of patients, but it can be, you know, it can be purely for monetary values or for making money. And the beautiful thing about the university is we don't have that. We're just developing technologies that's going to help the world in a positive way and be also available to the whole world together. I mean, I alluded to that in my discoveries, that it was important to have it scale up and cost effective to be available to everybody.
Adam, can I just add something?
Yes, Malcolm, please.
Look, I think I just want to applaud the team, the SWADE team, and indeed the previous group that were asking a similar question. Look, I think digital access has become more available than ever before. It's also become cheaper. I mean, obviously there is a cost barrier. You've got to be able to buy a device, but they are cheaper, certainly, you know, in terms of computing power. They've never been as cheap as they are today. Access to the internet is by and large ubiquitous in Australia. And again, it's cheaper than it's been in years past, certainly by, you know, respect to the amount of data that you can upload and download. I think user interfaces have become much more intuitive, you know, and that's been driven by, well, just, you know, the consumerization of tech. You don't have to be a boffin to access any of these applications or, you know, websites or, you know, smartphone apps. But we can make some very rash assumptions about digital literacy. And I think it's really important to identify people, whether they're you know, particular demographics, often people that are old, you know, even as old as me or older, if that's conceivable, who are not digitally literate, and make sure that they are. So I mean, you really need to be able to have that digital access to be able to, you know, get the best out of our very wide and indeed unwired society today. So I want to applaud them on their work. I think in other words, I think availability is greater than it's been in the past, but there's still a lot more work to be done. Very important that governments particularly make access to their services available via a smartphone. You know, this is a big priority of my digital transformation agency, and, you know, all of those changes to MyGov, and, you know, there's too many of them to go through really, but it is part of an agenda that you just have to keep on pushing. And the key is, I'll just conclude on this, the key is focus on the user. Don't think about, you know, the customer, you know, the service, if you like, the owner. You've just got to keep on focusing on the user and make whatever you're trying to do more accessible to them. And if you do that, that makes sense whether you're a government, whether you're a not-for-profit, or whether you're in business, because obviously the more people can access your service, the more likely you are to be able to sell them something.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Earlier in the pandemic, we had my first ever Zoom call with my mum, who's 79 years old. And that moment of excitement where mum worked out how to go down and unmute herself so that we could hear her, there was a hooting and hollering on both sides of the Zoom call that I think was probably close to what was going on at Houston when Neil Armstrong landed the lander on the moon. It was that sort of a breakthrough. Our next question is from one of our Regionate teams, the innovation competition the university ran earlier this year. Elise, I'll get you to answer this one because it talks about rural and regional areas. And of course, the ABC has a tremendous national reach. So let's take our first Regionate 2020 video question.
Our team tied as winners for the 2020 Regionate Challenge with our idea,
Joy, an app to help target youth unemployment in our region.
Our question is addressed to the whole panel.
2020 is a year that has negatively impacted Australian youth employment opportunities.
what advice can you give to younger Australians who are struggling to find casual work in both high school and university?
Great question from Bombarderi High School. Take it away, Elise Morgan.
Oh, toughest question, I think, of the panel comes straight to me. Thank you, Adam. It is an incredibly tough time. And it's not, I think it's been exacerbated by what's happened this year, but I think it's always been an issue to find good work while you're either a student, a school student or a senior student at university. I think I actually had a look at what Bombarderi's come up with their Joy app, which I think is really incredible. And I think that's exactly what needs to be happening. I mean, I think we're a bit beyond the point where we're just responding to little notices in the window of a business in a regional town as to, you know, for people to find work. We've moved on from that. And working on things like this, I think, is incredibly important to create networks and to create opportunities and to highlight the opportunities that are available. I started in regional Australia. I grew up in the central west of New South Wales and also in Sydney. I had a half-half. And the disparity in the opportunities between a small town and being in Sydney are completely unfair. And so to be able to democratise being able to have access to work, casual work, I think is incredibly important. And I think one of the great things that has come out of this pandemic, there's not many, but I think there's a few, is that there has been a complete shift in business focus from wanting to be able to see, feel, touch, have a human living body in their office or in their workplace to be able to see that they're doing that work, to being able to trust someone to be logging on remotely and to be able to fulfill a task as expected, on time, and to the standard that's required. And I think that's perhaps maybe what should be exploited or what could be exploited by students of all types looking for work. I mean, there's, the typical sort of, working in the bakery or etc. You're going to have to turn up for that. But think broader. You can now think broader because of the technology that we have. What do you want to do? What services could you provide? Could you do school coaching? Are you a university student? Could you do school coaching? Could you help a senior school student with their English or their maths or their science? You could do that by Zoom. You're in a regional town or you're at a regional university. Could you be helping someone in somewhere else in the country that needs those skills and needs that help? Think broader than what we've always done. Innovate in your own mind as to what skills you have and how you may be able to use that in the economy. Because there are people out there who want you. There are people out there who need you, who need your skills. You all have incredible minds that are so different to the older generations that have been before you. And you do have a lot to offer.
Thank you very much, Elise. I'll get a quick comment from Professor Zreiquat, and then I'll send our last video question to Malcolm Turnbull. But the university sector in particular, Professor, profoundly impacted from working at home and the like. Do you think that's going to be an ongoing change? Has university change forever? And will that have an impact on the sort of people who can access a university education, Professor?
I think we miss having the students here, that's for sure. Students miss working with us and we miss working with them. But I think, as Elise mentioned, you know, the Zoom, the area of the Zoom, we can always interact with them. I have never stopped one day interacting with these students. And going back to the questions we had earlier, we just established last year a society called Biotech Future Challenge, where all the professors, not only from our universities across the country, work very closely with the younger generation to innovate. And as Alisa said, this is a great opportunity for you. Be out there, approach the scientists, approach the professors or the PhD students to work with them. We will provide tutoring expertise. We will provide some sort of jobs for you. We have them that based on your interest and passion for this. Has the university impacted? Yes and no. It was impacted for people who have wet labs, who needs to go to the lab and do the research. But other than that, if you don't need to be in the lab, we still carried on with our research, using what we can from opportunities to make the best out of it. Persistent determination is the key here.
Let's take our final Regionate video question for Malcolm Turnbull, and then we'll move on to your Slido questions. Hit up us on Slido if you've got a question. Here's a question for you, former Prime Minister.
Hi, we're from the Riverina Anglican College and we're in Year 10. Our team, the Classroom, tied as the winners of the 2020 Regionate Challenge with our idea of animal facial recognition technology.
Our question is addressed to former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. When speaking about innovation in the Australian context, country and regional Australia is often left out.
In your opinion, how should we support young country Australians like us to partake in innovation opportunities?
Great question, Malcolm Turnbull. How do we bring all Australians, including those in rural and regional areas and youngsters, on the innovation journey?
Well, I think the answer is to do exactly what they're doing. I think that's a fantastic idea. And, you know, the facial recognition for stock, brilliant. Look, really, it's, you know, if ever there was a time that technology has annihilated distance, it is today. You know, if you had said 12 months ago, if you'd walked into anywhere, the Sydney University, a big professional services firm, your school and the Riverina, if you'd worked in there and said, hey, how about next year we all work from home and, video conference, people would have thought you were nuts. And even if they didn't think you were nuts, they would have thought you were very impractical. But the fact is that's what we've been doing. And so the combination of ubiquitous broadband and applications like this and others has made it possible. But, you know, it's, look, plainly, you've really got to come up with great ideas and get on with it. And, you know, good ideas don't only emerge, in the cities. I mean, I'll give you just one example, a company that we're invested in called Safety Culture, which is an occupational health and safety application going very well globally, started by a young Australian guy called Luke Anea in Townsville. Now, you know, that's a long way from the Riverina, but it's also a long way from Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne. And the bottom line is that there really should be no barriers. I mean, just believe in yourself, think big, and recognize that you can access anything and anyone in the world now more than ever before. I mean, we've always talked in Australia about the tyranny of distance. As I said, if ever it has been vanquished, it is today. So, you know, I wish you all the best. And I mean, you know, one of the group beforehand was asking about casual jobs for students. I mean, one of the things to do is to get out into your community and find people you can help, work like this, set up Zoom, help them with the right webcam, just provide them with a bit of digital experience and savvy that, you know, a lot of people don't have. I mean, it's pretty easy to set set something like this up, but honestly, a lot of and it's not nearly as expensive as it used to be, but a lot of people struggle with it, just as Adam was saying earlier. So look, just believe in yourself, keep being iconoclastic. Whatever you do, if someone says we've always done it this way, remember we're living in a very volatile era. Everything else is changing around us, so you've got to be prepared to look at things in a new light, with new eyes every day. You cannot be complacent about, standing still.
So true, Malcolm Turnbull. I was watching just the other night. My younger daughter was sitting on the couch on the phone at the same time as I happened to be on my phone across the room, and I just reflected that when I was her age, it wasn't possible for two people in the one house to be on the phone at the same. You couldn't make two separate phone calls. And if my daughter was suddenly transported back to the age where she could not use her phone when I was using my phone, that would so radically invert her world. I don't think she'd be able to handle it at all. Nicholas, you've had some great questions coming in on Slido. How about we throw to you? Why don't you hit us up in the panel with some of these Slido questions that have come in during the discussion so far? Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Adam. We have a couple of questions coming through from our Q&A, but we also have a couple of questions coming through from the Spark Festival Q&A. It has a couple of hundred people on it. So the first question I'd like to put forward is from Julie. She asks, how do we continue to ensure diversity of thought, background, and experience to contribute to news innovation and social impact? Diversity.
Let's start. Professor Zreiquat, is the university community that you deal with a diverse range of ideas and sources at the moment?
Absolutely. And no innovation can happen without diversity. It's very, very important to have the creative mind working together. So we need creativity, we need innovation, culture of ongoing discoveries, and to do that, culture of gender, culture of ethnicity, that's all important to have that. And at the university, this is what we have. I sit in the Faculty of Engineering, but I alluded to the fact that I've started this network led by the undergraduate students, which is Biotech Future Challenges. And this is a diverse community from medicine, from engineering, from art, from business, from architecture. They're all working together to help the younger generation to achieve their goals in innovation. And just going back to what Malcolm said earlier, believe in yourself. One of the people who won, the school who won the innovative challenge that we ran in 2019 was from regional Australia. And the other ones who ran it were homeschool kids. So believe in yourself, in your capability, in what you can do, and you will do it. And no person on their own can develop any innovation or any technology. It's a diverse group of people working together to get to where we are.
Elise, in a field like yours, which is a creative field, what's the importance of having a diverse range of voices around the table?
The importance of having a diverse range of voices is that I think we can see it from what's happened at so many big companies around Australia where we haven't had a diverse range of thought around the table. We've had white, older, privileged men, largely, sitting around boardrooms making decisions, and they've had catastrophic consequences because they've all been on the same track of concentrating on, a narrow field of priorities: profit, growth, beating competitors, etc. And there hasn't been a range of views on that board to say, hang on a second, have we made sure that we've got the right IT, security, etc. systems in place to ensure that we're not facilitating financing of child pornography or terror financing when it comes to Westpac, or the same for Commonwealth Bank, etc. And there's so many examples of where you've had boards or groups of people from the same background with the same or similar education in charge of some kind of organisation or some kind of community, and there hasn't been someone saying, oh, have you thought about X or have you thought about Y? And that's why it's so important. And that's why it's so important, I think, when we're talking about innovation and coupling it with social impact, that you bring together a whole range of people and that innovation isn't used to exclude people, that we don't focus on innovation as it relates specifically to technology or to STEM, because there's a lot of people, me included, who are not scientists, who will never be scientists. As much as I would love to be, it's not my field of passion or deep understanding, but I have ideas. And there are many people in universities, in business, in all sectors of the community who shouldn't be excluded from this club that is focusing on innovation. It should be democratised and brought to everyone, particularly regional Australia, because there are so many problems out there that there are so many solutions to.
Nicholas, give us another question.
I think this one's directed to Mr. Turnbull. It comes from Alex. He's asking, what are your thoughts on including innovation into the curriculum, particularly into primary school?
That's a really good question. I don't have a sort of quick answer to that. I think a good teacher would be, you really should be talking to my daughter Daisy, Lucy and my daughter Daisy, who's a school teacher and got very strong views about all of these pedagogical issues. But I would have thought a good teacher would be trying to encourage kids to be as original and creative as possible. I mean, as a parent, even as a grandparent, you revel in the originality of young children. They are so imaginative and creative. They invent their own languages. They invent the most amazing stories. I mean, the other day I was listening to one of our granddaughters, who's 4, little Alice, telling a 9-year-old boy a story, and he was completely rapt. It was completely wacky. But she was just this free flow of imagination. And you sort of think to yourself, gosh, she's going to go to school and they'll drill all that out of her. I think you've got to try to just really do everything you can to encourage innovation and creativity. But, diversity is key to it, as Elise said. And the critical thing, look, I'll boil it down to one very good point. The biggest challenge to innovation is cultural. And the challenge is this, that in too many organisations, particularly big ones, but sometimes even in a family, a small organisation or in a school, you get a culture which says, if you come up with a new idea and it doesn't work out, you will get, censured, or, you'll get you'll be shamed. And on the other hand, if you come up with a good idea, your superior will probably appropriate it. You've got to have a culture that encourages people to think of new things. And a bit worn out now, Elise, I agree, have a go. You've got to be prepared to do that. And you've got to be prepared to say, as I used to say all the time when I was PM, look, I don't guarantee this will work. This is my best idea at the moment. If it doesn't work, we'll dump it. If we find someone else achieving the same objective more effectively, we'll shamelessly plagiarise it. You can do that in public policy. Don't do that with intellectual property, I hasten to add. You've got to be realistic about this and set expectations. But, if people work in an organisation where they think that the consequence of novelty or innovation is all downside, in other words, that if it works, they'll get scant reward. If it doesn't work, they'll get damned. The rational actor then does nothing. So you've got to encourage that, and that has to come from the top, and you've got to actually live it. You can't just say it. You can't just say, oh, we believe in innovation and taking risks. And then when someone takes a risk and it all goes pear-shaped, you then sack them and, call for, them to have their pay docked and all that sort of stuff. You've got to have, innovation has to be lived, and you've got to recognise the key thing is recognizing that nobody really knows what the answer is, you know, and you've got, and what is the right answer changes in the circumstances. So as long as you've got that, which requires a degree of humility, actually, on the part of those who are the incumbents in power and in knowledge, then you'll get, you know, then you will get a genuinely innovative culture.
Got time for another couple of questions before we wrap this up. Nicholas, over to you.
This one's directed towards Hala, I think. It's an anonymous person, but they ask, how would you describe the role of university education in terms of supporting an innovation economy from your perspective?
Nick, did you say that for me?
Yes,
yeah, right. Yep.
I think, you know, the education and economy, what we really have to change the way we educate our kids these days. It's not anymore the era of the engineering that happened 200 years ago, the discovery of the engines, the discovery of the electricity. It's very, very different. And Malcolm alluded to it. We have to work very closely with the need of the society, with the age of the disruption we live in. It's not anymore following books and go and just do exams and do that. In fact, anybody who takes my course, I am very much against doing exams and staying by the book. It's to promote the innovation, you need to create creativity, and that creativity will result in these younger kids coming up with innovation that will feed back to the economy. Innovation, when done well, will feed big time to the economy of any society in the world. So the key here is to change the education system. That will take time, but around the world, there is a big talk about changing the education system. And that's critical.
Nicholas, one more question.
This final one could probably go out to the entire panel. The question is, do you envisage a future Silicon Valley in Australia? And as we innovate, what protections might be needed for Australian IP?
Fantastic. Elise, would you like to start us off on that one, a future Silicon Valley in Australia?
How about I start by unmuting myself? To be honest, I can't see us having a Silicon Valley, but at the same time, I don't see the need for one. I don't think it's best to have one huge giant hub where all the ideas are born out of. Currently, CSL, in conjunction with the University of Melbourne, is building a multi-billion-dollar facility down in Melbourne, and that is going to focus on medical innovation, on biomed, on all those sorts of things. That will be a hub that will attract people from around Australia, but also from around the world to go there and to sit in the same areas, come up with the problems and then also the solutions that are related to that field of science and field of expertise. There is another one that is rumoured. It's been, I think, on the cards for around 2 years to be around Westmead and the Uni of Western Sydney. And then there's, other hubs around Australia that are fledgling, but they need the input of corporate Australia, financial input of corporate Australia. They need some policy help and some incentives from governments, both state and federal. But do we need one giant big Silicon Valley where we have all of the VCs, where we have all of the private money, where we have all of the tech entrepreneurs all piling in on top of each other? Maybe not. Maybe it's better that we have it split up and specialist areas all over the country. That's how we democratize it a little more. Do I see it happening? No, the big one, no, I don't. Do I have huge hope and excitement that we'll have these smaller hubs all over the country? Yes, I do. They're starting to emerge. And the glory of the pandemic is that so many of Australians who have gone overseas, chasing the Silicon Valleys, chasing, the opportunities that are in Israel's version of Silicon Valley, they are starting to come back to Australia now, and they're looking for things to do. They're looking for opportunities. They want to be here, but they want the jobs. And my money is that they're going to create them for themselves.
Okay. Malcolm Turnbull, we're pushing up towards our 2 o'clock finish time, but I'd love to get your thoughts on this. A lot of people in your time as Prime Minister, Malcolm, would have pitched to you, let's create Australia, Silicon Valley, and let's put it here, there, whatever. What do you think of the concept?
Well, I agree with Elise. I don't think you need to put it anywhere in particular. And I don't think, Silicon Valley arguably is distributed right across the United States. I mean, I'm invested in very innovative companies, American, most of our venture capital investing is in, the vast majority is in Australian technology, naturally, but we have a number of investments in tech in Texas and in the Midwest. It's all over America. And the same is true in Australia. There's a sort of serial venture capitalist entrepreneur who's a friend of ours called David Shane, who has got a fund here and business in the States and in Israel. And he said to me the other day that he thought the tech ecosystem here, both in terms of the amount of innovation and science and the amount of capital available, was now comparable to Israel's. So I would have thought that's rather surprised me, but David would know and I wouldn't. So, I think there is so much going on. I mean, we are seeing so many deals. We've done about a dozen deals in the last year, and we have looked at 5 or 6 times as many as that. We could look at 20 times as many if we had more resources. And I tell you that, so there's a lot happening out there. There is a lot of money available. It's not on the scale of Silicon Valley, but it doesn't really need to be. And I mean, again, just picking up what Elise said, it's a global business, right? So, the difference between, we work with a big VC fund pretty closely in the Valley, 10, 11 Capital. And honestly, I don't think we could work any more closely with them, if they were on the other side of the street in Sydney. We have talked to them like this all the time. And there are many other partners in other parts of the world. So bottom line is, think global.
Thank you so much. And that's a great note on which I think to leave all of this as we hit 1:59 p.m. Malcolm Turnbull, Hala Zreiqat and Elise Morgan, sincere thanks for being part of our panel today. To the questioners, both pre-recorded and on Slido, and to the dozens of people we didn't get to, apologies. Thank you all so much. And also for tuning in online. At 2:15 today, 2:15 p.m, the panel on crisis or opportunity takes place. Transport expert Larissa Miller, former writer for the startup Deputy, Sanket Totwar, and the amazing co-founder of the iconic And Hatch, Adam Jacobs, will be part of that panel. There's a Zoom link for that in the next session in your original invite. Do not use this current one. Make sure you use the new one and get in touch with other things throughout this fascinating Sydney Innovation Festival. To our panel again, thank you very much.